Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2011 to 2012 series Mr. Terrific, part of DC's The New 52. Back in 1940, in what is now called the Golden Age of comic books, the world saw the birth of the very first ever superhero team, the Justice Society of America. While not initially a member of the team, Terry Sloan, a man calling himself the completely not egotistical name of Mr. Terrific, would come to join them. He's not the person we're talking about today. Because later, during the Silver Age, the JSA would have faded into relative obscurity and been replaced by the more modern JLA, or Justice League of America. But never one to forget where they came from, DC would revive many Golden Age characters, particularly the JSA, and claim them as existing in another dimension on a parallel Earth called Earth 2. The Silver Age was a clever time, let me tell ya. Earth 2 would be a world perpetually frozen in the 1940s, while the main universe kept pace with the real world. That is, until the event that is the answer to every comic book related trivia question ever occurred. That's right, I'm talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis would combine the two universes into one universe, bringing the JSA into the main universe, which is how they would stay for over 2 decades, until another big event, Flashpoint, saw another drastic rebirth of the DC universe, and the fate of the JSA would be initially unclear. But during those 2 decades of merged Earths, the original Mr. Terrific would die, and eventually be replaced by a new Mr. Terrific, this guy named Michael Holt. Holt would continue Sloan's legacy, even joining the JSA. This also meant being just a character who was part of the JSA and not a solo superhero. That is, until he got his very first solo series ever during the New 52. I'm not sure why specifically Mr. Terrific was chosen to receive an ongoing series during the New 52, outside of his obvious terrificness, but DC was looking to start 52 ongoing series with the New 52, so maybe it's more notable who didn't receive their own series. So let's take a trip to Terrific Town to see just how terrific Mr. Terrific's first solo series is, and take this away. The comic opens in true New 52 fashion on Mr. Terrific in mid-fight with this guy who's totally not a British Iron Man. Cause, see, he's British, so he's different. They probably call it a planchette or something. So I hope you already know about Mr. Terrific, or watched my intro, because as with many other New 52 comics, yeah, they're not going to really go into his backstory here. But this intro does feature one very important fact about Mr. Terrific. Apparently, he has a nice bum. One might even say, it's terrific. His New 52 outfit certainly seems to be designed to show off more of his terrific bod, including a new T mask that is maybe a little less obviously a T, and the famous Fair Play slogan of Mr. Terrific now tattooed brazenly on his arms. It might seem dumb for a hero to get a tattoo that reveals his superhero identity on it, but they do make a point of showing civilian Michael with his shirt off later in the issue, showing us no tattoos. Apparently his terrific technology that he uses in his suit includes something that changes his appearance, including adding tattoos. Terrific stops British Planchette Man by using electricity to turn the Eye of London into a giant magnet. Or, in other words, with science, bitch! Haha, I knew that panel would be useful again. The fight with the magnetized man here isn't relevant to, well, anything. And when we get a flashback at this point, it isn't going to explain what we're doing here. Instead, it's going to go back to when Mr. Terrific was just Mr. Very Regular Guy. Well, a regular guy that was a super genius, the head of his own company, and married. Only on the way to meet his wife for his birthday dinner, he discovers that his wife was in a terrible car accident. Apparently her GPS in her car went wild, and since people are obviously slaves to their car GPS systems, she let it lead her right into danger. Oh, and she reveals that she was pregnant as she dies. Dude, that's messed up. Michael Holt's emotions pretty much died with his wife and unborn baby, and he devotes his entire life to just science. Which has to be the most bleak way that I've said that word on my channel. normally I'm so excited about science. So one day, Michael is ready to test an experiment on himself that will most likely kill him when suddenly a big naked man appears in his lab and tells him he's his son from some future and that Michael should live so he can change the world. This little flashback is apparently brought to us as a story he's telling the woman he's sleeping with. I say sleeping with because that seems to be the implication here, and also she specifically says they're not really a couple, so just like friends with benefits, I guess. Also, though it's not directly stated until like issue 8, I think, apparently this woman is actually Karen Starr, which, last I checked, was the civilian identity of Power Girl. Which means Mr. Terrific is apparently dating Power Girl in this universe. Only she's kind of not Power Girl here, but also kind of is. I mean, he doesn't seem to know she's Power Girl, and she doesn't seem to know he's Mr. Terrific, so I don't know. They don't go into it here. Read World's Finest for more about her if you really want to know. Anyway, what's weird about him explaining this encounter with naked future son to her is the flashback begins with him narrating to, presumably us, as to why mild-mannered Michael Holt decided to become a superhero. And the flashback ends with it being a story Holt is explaining to Karen Starr as to why he hasn't killed himself. That's kind of an awkward narrative transition that's probably going to leave the reader a bit confused as to what's going on, but oh well. The plot for the opening of the series focuses on Terrific facing off against this guy in this terrible Megamind cosplay who, believe it or not, is going to call himself Brainstorm. I get it, BS. All the good names have been taken. Brainstorm is apparently hacking people's brains, cause that's a thing, and that even includes Michael Holt's brain, causing him to attempt to set off an extinction-level earthquake, supposedly in order to kill this presidential candidate. With the help of one of his T-spheres, a special technology Holt invented that are floating artificial intelligent robots that he has some kind of neuro-link to, he's able to essentially reboot his brain and regain control, which then lets him stop the incident. I'd expect him to be in a lot of trouble for causing the problem to begin with, but not even the senator is blaming him for what happened, which just seems so shockingly understanding for a politician. That seems even less believable than the guy running around the sky on floating intelligent robot balls. Yeah, that's a sentence I just said. Terrific traces down Brainstorm's Wi-Fi signal and uses his T-spheres to block his transmissions. So Megabrain here decides to show himself, and show us a fairly extreme version of typical bad guy arrogance by telling Mr. Terrific his real name and backstory. Which is just that he was attempting to discover a way to download a human intelligence into a machine and accidentally instead downloaded machine intelligence into a human. And was like, what can I do with this ability? I can become a supervillain! This guy's a super interesting bad guy, my dudes. Since Michael's able to block his Wi-Fi signal like his name is Winter Storm and Brainstorm is Texas, Mr. Blue over here decides to go old school and connect with a hardline. When that fails, he decides, screw it, I'm just going to download everybody's brain into mine, because again, brain hacking's a thing. And Mr. Terrific stops him by sending hundreds of T-spheres to overload the information intake, causing Brainstorm to process more information than he can take in. Like putting too much air into a balloon! Brainstorm then reveals that he's realized Mr. Terrific has to be Michael Holt because nobody else could be smart enough to fit the role. Well, smart enough in the right skin color, I guess. He also reveals that when his happy accident that resulted in him becoming fake Megamind first occurred, it caused GPS systems around the area to go haywire. Meaning that Mrs. Holt's on the Fritz GPS system that caused her accident was itself caused by Brainstorm. This leads to Mr. Terrific showing himself to be not so terrific in front of a bunch of kids as he nearly beats the Blue Man to death. Luckily, he's able to stop himself from going too far and uses one of his T-spheres to make Brainstorm forget that he ever figured out his secret identity. Because those things can do that apparently. Because they have more uses than a sonic screwdriver. They probably even work on wood. With his reputation not doing so great, Michael decides to go hide in the 9th dimension, an alternate dimensional space he uses to quick travel between various locations. He had assumed that nothing lived there, but it turns out a bunch of weird aliens lived there, and they decide to abduct him. It seems they want a bunch of slaves to turn into a dedicated sacrificial fighting force for them. Michael realizes that because these aliens, the Krill, speak English, and none of his fellow prisoners do, nor do they speak references to the day the Earth stood still, that the Krill must be wearing some kind of translator. Without other options for communicating, he attempts some sign language to indicate his plan, but his fellow prisoners are too busy desiring to prove their superiority to listen to him. Fortunately, there's always a bigger fish, and this bigger fish is willing to listen to Michael's plan. So Michael uses the tech in his T-mask to create a hole in the force field on their prison, and he leads a prisoner revolt. The prisoners quickly take control of the ship, but Michael's not buying how easy it is. He compares what's happening to history, to when slaves would be dumped from sailing ships simply to deny them their freedom. Now, it seems the Krill might be doing the same thing, abandoning the slave ship so they can blow it up from a safe distance. But Michael finds potential hope in a secret prisoner kept on board, locked up in solitary because, he believes, even the Krill were afraid of the prisoner's power. The hidden prisoner turns out to be this small alien named Pelotha. Pelotha comes from an alien race where, once they settle into their gender, the females can absorb energy and the males can expel it. But Pelotha doesn't want to choose between the genders and has both male and female parts. Because of this, Pelotha considers themselves to be cursed and unworthy, but Michael argues that they have no reason to feel that way, and in fact might even be more because of their condition, not less, with the ability to both absorb and expel energy. Are you subtexting me right now? I feel like you're subtexting me. I don't know. Do you guys think comics can be about more than just dudes in too tight clothing beating the living daylights out of each other? Nah. Michael's speech works on Pelotha, and when the Krill fire at the ship, Pelotha absorbs all the energy and sends it back at them. With the alien ship freed from slavery, Michael heads home, where he quickly runs across this Frenchman calling himself the Tomorrow Thief. And not Le Voleur de Demain, which would make more sense since, you know, he's French. But yeah, naming himself in English. Sure, why not? The Tomorrow Thief can phase right through objects like Kitty Pryde, allowing him to steal some top secret technology, and I feel like I just read this exact fight in Static Shock a couple weeks ago. Oh wait, I did. And Mr. Terrific even attempts to use his T-spheres to bring the fight to the exact same conclusion, only his T-spheres have been shorted out. Man, I feel like science is failing us a lot in this story. Science! Well, science actually does still save the day when Mr. Terrific leads the Tomorrow Thief to an underground sulfur lake. Wait. Parfait means perfect? I always assumed it just meant like pie or something. Oh man, now I want parfait. Parfaits are delicious. Oh right, the sulfur. Apparently, high pressure or extreme temperatures easily break hydrogen bonds so that, I guess, it makes it hard for the thief to just phase through things, so, science? Bitch? Also, did Mr. Terrific just kill a dude? That's not so very terrific. Though he may be a big international traveler now, Mr. Terrific still has time for the little things, and when he returns home to LA, the primary location of most of the series, he saves a little kid from a speeding car and shows his patronage for local businesses. He also points out that he doesn't like to be called Mr. T, which is great because I frequently refer to people by their first initial, so Mr. T is totally something I would have called him without even thinking about it. Also, I'll point out that series cover artist Geoff Johns actually refers to him as Mr. T in some bonus artwork included in the back of the collected edition, so I can't help but wonder if this bit of dialogue was an intentional reference to that. Around this time, an invisible ship suddenly appears in the port of Los Angeles, and there's apparently a nuclear bomb aboard and an entire contingent of invisible Russian soldiers. Michael proceeds to Jack Bauer a quick end to that situation, but by the time he's done with that, he's already knee-deep in some Robot Man problems. There's been a building thread around one of the members of the board of his company, Donald, attempting to work with a group calling themselves The Circle, to seize control of the company, and seize control of Alika Okafor, who has basically been Michael's own personal Pepper Potts throughout the series. Or maybe she's more like a Martha Jones, to continue my Doctor Who references, since he's paid her like zero attention this whole time. Anyway, part of the Circle's plan was apparently to turn Donald into a robot. I don't know why. I'm sure this plot was supposed to be much more fleshed out, pardon the pun, But the series was being cancelled, so we just jumped past all the plot and straight to Giant Robot Man. But when Donald attempts to shut down an AI-run system and hold industries to ruin Michael, the AI strikes back and shuts Donald down instead. Despite having stopped the threat, the military still shows up to contain the situation and want to arrest Michael, because apparently Mr. Terrific has some past with this group, as quickly revealed in a brief flashback to his early days as a superhero, information that was probably intended for the issue 0 that, like with Static Shock, never happened. Michael is rescued by, of all people, a local reporter who accuses the military of being bullies, which is, weirdly, enough to get them to back off. So Michael returns to his sanctuary to discover that Karen Starr attempted to access secret information and technology from his company regarding quantum tunneling. In an effort to figure out what she was up to, Michael accidentally sends himself falling down a rabbit hole to apparently join his former colleagues on Earth 2 in the series that had just recently started. And with that, this series comes to an equally sudden end, leading us into the breakdown. I think, more than anything, this comic was the victim of New 52 editorial decisions, which is somewhat ironic because that's probably the only reason it really existed in the first place. But it's clear that New 52 comics were expected to establish very slow burn storylines that would build for years and tie together bit by bit over time, requiring smaller stories to fill in the gaps in the meantime. And while I have pointed out that I do really enjoy that kind of thing in comic books, the New 52 also shows us a lot of examples of how that could go wrong. And while series writer Eric Wallace definitely tried to meet those requirements, and honestly I feel he handled it better than others, particularly better than Savage Hawkman, Static Shock, or Fury of Firestorm, being relatively better isn't enough to make this series good, and it ended up falling victim to all the same problems. A confusing main plot, too little time spent with the minor characters to make them interesting, and uninteresting and underwhelming minor villains filling the gap while bigger stories were built up. Michael's personal life is seen so little in this series that I didn't even bother to really mention anything about it. We just jump from one uninspired supervillain battle to the next with little to nothing in between. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of medium. The art is nice and the writing is strong enough to make this a perfectly fine attempt, but nothing here is going to wow anybody, and in the end it's little more than a disappointment. The collected edition gets 1 Fair Play, Win the Day, which is pretty good, even if the comic itself might be a letdown. You still get 8 issues and a fair amount of bonuses in the back, including character designs, cover concepts, and a collection of interior pages still in their pencil stages. Hey, that rhymed. Thanks everybody for watching. It's so exciting to see so many new faces coming aboard. I'm working hard to get to some of your requests over the next few months, so feel free to let me know what you'd like to see me cover and I'll add it to the list. Then, as always, make sure to click like and subscribe so you can make sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.